Hello, and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. Today is our third week of the month, and this week is dedicated to learning about a Zettelkasten and how you might use one of those in your writing. And to lead us off, Victoria is going to start with her presentation. This is a Monday lesson, the compass, where we get an overview of what we're doing for the week. So without further ado, take it away, Victoria.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone, Lilligans, onlurkers, anti-novelists, and everyone else, friends. Thank you so much for joining us. We're having so much fun putting this together, mainly because we have experienced the value of having some tools in your hands as a writer that helps you get the thoughts out of your head, get things into a format that you can work with them, and ultimately get the writing done. So the compass worksheet that I'm sharing with you today is called the Architecture of the Zettelkasten. Here's just a little quick peek at it. But you can download this. This is just a workflow. It shows you how I go about creating from basic ideas or captured ideas all the way down to installing those things in my note box, what the note cards look like when I go about drafting, and how all of that gets processed into finished drafts. So this is just an overview of my work process. The thing that I want to point your compass to today for my purposes is I want you to start thinking about, what am I going to put in my Zettelkasten? Now, I'm not going to go into the specific details for that because Kathleen has a presentation that is going to blow your socks off. She's just going to break it down in a way that it will make so much sense. So I'm going to leave that for her. But what I want you to think about for me is this. A young man approached Ernest Hemingway in about 1934, and Ernest was gracious enough to talk to this young writer about some of his processes. And when the writer said, "How do I go about becoming a better writer?" Hemingway gave him a terrific 3-point answer, but I'm only going to give you point one because we'll talk some more about it later. His first suggestion was observe. Observe your environment, observe people, observe conversations, observe things that interest you or engage you or catch your eye, and then sit down and try to write about them. Try to describe them in such detail that it makes it fascinating for the reader, as if they're discovering it for themselves. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to set aside just a few note cards for dialogue and maybe a few note cards for observations. I'll give you a couple of examples out of my Zettelkasten. One is a dialogue. It says dialogue at question. Okay, so this set of cards, there's about 15 of them. They capture questions that to me sound like some of my characters. So if I'm drafting a scene and I think, man, what would he say in this instance? I can go to my question cards that might have been flagged for that character, and I can say, oh, he says, you do know this is a trap, right? That applies to a specific character. It's in his voice, and I have it captured so I can go back and find it. Another one is, what if we've been wrong the whole time? Right? So these are pivotal kinds of scene questions that are maybe going to launch you into another scene or into a different chapter. So capturing those things and having them in your Zettelkasten where you can have them at hand and go back to them is critical when you're searching for what that character might say. Another example is dialogue at argument. I have a whole bunch of argumentative or conflictive phrases that I've captured. This one says, how can he possibly have figured all that out in one day? Hear the sarcasm? That's something my character Chad would say. So these are just things that I've captured and filed away for safekeeping should I need them when I'm writing dialogue later. So the final thing that I will leave you with is this. When we get to tomorrow, I'm going to give you quite a lengthy Excel workbook, and it's going to show you how I go about setting up my plot box, which is within my Zettelkasten, so that I can start filing in the sequence that I think things will happen for the book that I'm writing. So I'm not going to say too much more about that because we'll get into that tomorrow. But start thinking, as I said, number one, observe and start capturing slices of life that you think might apply to your story or that you think might be interesting later. And then when we start drafting, I'll show you how I pick those apart and start building them into scenes and sequels and how they become part of my characters. So with that, I'm going to throw the ball over to my esteemed colleague, Kathleen, and let her really dive in and show you the Zettelkasten.
Well, thank you so much, Victoria. I love those ideas, and I can't wait to start collecting scenes and questions. I think it's a great idea to build these resources of materials that you can have on hand when you're working. So then the question comes, well, where do I put them? And how do I find them again? Because these materials aren't going to be of any value to you unless you can get your hands back on them when it comes the time that you need to use them. So I'm going to show you two pieces of a Zettelkasten today. And I'm going to actually move my camera over to where you can see them. You might notice over here, there's two empty drawers, and that's because I've got them on my desktop. So I'm going to move my camera and give you a bird's eye view. Okay, now here we are on two boxes of a Zettelkasten. This box is full of main cards. And in this box are all of things of the nature that Victoria was just talking about. Ideas about writing, ideas about your character, ideas about the history. These are all what we call main cards. Over on this side are some important indexes, because without indexes, you can't find those main cards that you need at the time you need to use them. So here is the all-important alphabetical index. And you can see that some of my letters have gotten so dense that I've had to go to little subcards so that I can find them more easily. My idea is that I want to be able to grab a whole stack at once when I need to look something up. But let's take a little bit of a step back and answer a pretty basic question. What must you have in a Zettelkasten? And first of all, how on earth do you pronounce Zettelkasten? Well, the easiest way to pronounce Zettelkasten is notebox. That's exactly what it means. Or I broke it up into three words, Zettelkasten. Yeah, it's a Z, not an S, but if you say Zettelkasten, everybody will know what you mean. And you can slip that Z in pretty easily. Have fun. That's the most important part of it. Have fun with it, because a Zettelkasten is your box, and nobody needs to know what you've squirreled away in your particular box. So, what does it take to make a card that's going to go into the main box where you're going to keep the stuff that you plan to keep that for your story, like those ideas for conversations? Well, a main card needs some basic information. It needs a number. Let's see if I can focus on this. It needs a number. It needs information that you got from somewhere. It needs your feelings about the information. And it also helps to have, but you don't necessarily have to have, how it fits into the other things that you've got in your notebox. And it's a very good idea also to indicate the source. Where did this information come from? Well, the source, we can give you different abbreviations. It's just, I like to use, if it's a book, I like to use the initials of the author's name and then the initials of the keywords in the book's title. That's a pretty easy part. The information, well, that's either the conversation or maybe it's a piece of history if you're doing research for your book. Feelings, well, that's easy. That just comes from you, how you react to it. And boom, 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 number. That's the one that throws people for a loop. But I'm here to tell you that's the easiest part of all. People are scared of numbers. But once you get into it, there is nothing to it. First of all, there's some rules for numbers. There's only 3 and they're very simple. Every card gets one. No two are alike. Can't use the same number twice. And if you throw your cards on the floor, you can put them back in order using the number. That's it. There are no other rules. That said, there are some conventions. It turns out that, in large part due to Scott Shepard, who taught me how to do Zettelkasten, and I think also taught Victoria how to do Zettelkasten, and he's the creator of a magnificent tome on the subject that I would show you if it was within arm's reach. I'll show it to you tomorrow. I'll get it handy, or maybe Victoria can find it while we can catch this up at the end. You'll have to speak, Victoria, or they won't get your focus.
Oh, yeah, here you go, guys. The Anti-Net Zettelkasten by Scott P. Shepard. It is a powerhouse and tells you everything and more than you ever wanted to know.
And whose name did you see in small letters on the front of that book?
Well, let's just take a peek. Oh, it's the esteemed Kathleen Spracklen on the cover blurb. Woo!
That's just, he just simply chose to put my testimonial on the front cover. I am not responsible for the work in that book. That is Scott's work. Okay, so because of Mr. Scott P. Shepard, who is the guru of all gurus on the Zettelkasten, we have developed a habit of starting all of our numbers off with 4 digits. And that 4 digits kind of hangs people up. What are the right 4 digits? Oh no, 4 of them? I've got to come up with 4 of them? How will I ever know what the right ones are? I am going to give you the magic formula that you will never forget. And when I give you this magical formula, you will say how easy these numbers are. And you'll chuckle if you hear anybody else talking about numbers being hard. You ready? Okay. The numbers are simply geography. All right, I'm going to step back a bit. If you want your card to be in the front of the book, in the front of the box, use low numbers like 1,000, 2,000, or 3,000. If you want your cards to be in the middle of your box, use middle-sized numbers like 4,000, 5,000, or 6,000. And if you want your cards to be towards the end of your box, use big numbers like 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. You get to choose, and it's all a matter of geography. Once you've picked your spot, then all the rest of the digits, just sort them from there. These go, say you pick a 4,000, which I use for my writing, 4,100 comes before 4,200, and that is the only meaning of those numbers. You get to pick them, and they work with your world. I'm not going to go into any great detail until tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit more about card numbering specifically, but just to give you an idea, I tend to put my own personal writing notes about my writing in the 4,000s. So when I start capturing those dialogues, like Victoria tells me to, I'm going to find a number in the 4,000 range to use. Some of my early numbers are kind of busy. I've used up to 4,600. Oops. So maybe they'll be 4,700. I tend to put my research in the 5,000s. And we'll talk about much later, not in this unit at all, but we're going to be in a future unit, we'll be talking about doing research. My research tends to go into the 5,000s. I see a lot of numbers in the 7,000s for Victoria, but I will leave that up to her as she has promised to explain that tomorrow. And what I want you to do with your overview time with the Zettelkasten is think about getting a box. The simplest thing to use for a box is just a shoebox. Frankly, a plain old cardboard shoebox will work. For a long, long time, I used plastic shoe boxes. They're very nice. But just get yourself a box. Get yourself a stack of 4x6 cards. I think you'll really like the 4x6. For some of the work that I do, I also recommend having some colored cards. I like the pastel colored cards, and I'll show you how I use those. And so you want a box and some cards, and you're going to also want some stuffing, because you're going to find that when your box is pretty empty, they're just going to flip all over the bottom of the box. So stuff them with what you will, whatever will take up the space. And the simplest thing to stuff them with is blank cards. You probably bought a bunch of them, stick them in the back. I make some fancy little guys out of junk mail. Literally, these things are so much fun to make. Turn junk mail into something productive. They're just little packages of junk mail that I wrap and put little things around. And then you can use as many or as few as you need to take up the empty space at the back of your box. And then you get to feel like your box is full, even when it's not full. I like using them in
That
little
is
sizes.
brilliant. I love that so much.
You know, you're going to want a V shape when you're working with it to be able to use it. So having them in small clumps like that lets you manage the V very nicely. So that is our compass. Anything you want to tell our folks before we say goodbye and see you Tuesday for the mat?
Well, that was amazing. Can I just say you took the vast concept of how to start building this box of amazing stuff out and distilled it down so it's not even terrifying anymore, which is amazing. My first box, full disclosure, people, full disclosure, my first box was the lid of a recipe box. Seriously, that's what I started with because it was all I had. Who doesn't have random recipe boxes from your grandma stuck in a closet somewhere? This was my mom's recipe box. And the thing is the body of it was full of recipes. So I just pulled the lid off and that's what I started with. So yeah, you really can start with anything. Then I migrated to keep my blank cards in. This is a napkin holder. We live on a cattle ranch, so of course everything is cattle themed. I got my little star there, but this is a napkin holder, but that's what holds my blank cards. So really make it your own and have fun with it. Source whatever is in your environment. You don't have to invest $1 million in fancy stuff. Just grab the nearest thing and make it work.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this. Tomorrow, of course, in our map, we'll go a little bit deeper. And we're not going to go super, super deep on the Zettelkasten anyway, because really the Zettelkasten is your tool, but it's really a really, really important tool. So I want you to get started on it and not be scared of it. And then because we are going to give you tomorrow some specific kinds of cards to get you started in putting some stuff into your Zettelkasten. So see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you.